If you've ever struggled to get your tracks to sound like your favourite artist, then this video is for you. I'm going to show you 4 things we can learn from a professional track with over 19 million streams. By the end of this video, you'll know what to do with your latest track to take it to the next level. And if you're worried that copying these ideas will just make your track sound like the original, too similar, then stick around till the end when I'll show you the track I wrote whilst using the space in between as my reference track. Should we get into it? Let's start with the drums. If you listen closely, the beat is incredibly simple. It's a standard 4 on the floor kick pattern with minimal hi-hats and percussion. Nothing fancy. So you can see he starts off the drums, the very simple 4 on the floor kick and a high tom, that's it. We then get an offbeat hat, very subtle clap in the background. Then we get a sort of shaker groove. You can hear that the decay on the shaker changes slightly just to give a bit of variation. It's short and it's long. That adds to the groove. It's a really nice groove. Now, a lot of producers fall into the trap of overcomplicating their beats, adding more layers, more fills, more everything, frankly, thinking it will make the track more interesting. But in reality, too much complexity can actually kill the groove. It becomes distracting instead of hypnotic. Blomqvist does the opposite. He strips the beat down to the essentials. The kick, the hi-hats and the subtle percussive elements work together like clockwork, creating this steady pulse that locks you in. But there aren't that many layers. You know, the elements are quite distinct, quite subtle. Yes, there's an offbeat hi-hat, there's a clap, there's a kick, there's the tom still, there's some shaker and some odd sounds, but there may only be 5 or 6 layers there. Let's move further on into the track. Yeah, not much change. Tom is back in there. Breakdown, we just get a little hat. There's not much else going on there. Back to the chorus. It's the same beat. So this bit here, which I've called verse 5, no vocals, you can see here on my vocal track there are no vocals. This is probably the busiest section of the drums, and it comes after about 5 minutes of the track. So it's only at this point that he adds a little bit. It's got the drums. It might have a layer or 2 extra on the hats, but that's it. What's the lesson here? Well, the lesson for us is less is more. If your groove is strong enough, you don't need to add layers just for the sake of it. Focus on getting the core elements right. Now let's talk about arrangement. If you pay attention, there's a lot of space in this track. The bass line, the pads, even the vocals, they all breathe. There's no rush to fill every gap. Many producers struggle with this. There's a temptation to constantly add elements to keep things interesting, just like I said with the drums. But the problem is when everything is playing all the time, nothing stands out. The track feels cluttered. Here, the space between the notes is just as important as the notes themselves. The synth pads fade in and out. The bass line has gaps. Even the vocal phrases are stretched out, giving the track an airy, floating feel. So for a track called The Space In Between, I think it's fitting that we talk about the space in between different sounds in this track. And if you could look here, the yellow track here is the bass line, and the bass line sounds like this. So it's moving between notes of a chord. I think this is in F minor, but it's quite sparse. There's one layer, one sound, maybe a sub in there as well, but it's kind of a plucky or 8th note. Bit of rhythm to it. It's So it's not just every 8th note. And if you look at the waveform here, nothing much changes. So this section here, where I've said new lead pluck, you can see here, we'll go on to this, the melody, the pluck. This gets much louder, and while this gets louder, there are no vocals, and the bass gets quieter, you can see from the waveform. And that's what this track is all about. The breakdown here, where the drums come out, the bass comes out, the melody gets louder, and there are no vocals. So each section of the track has something which is taking center stage. So initially it's the vocals, but even if you look at the vocals, they are sparse. There are phrases and there's space in between. Good name for the track. Right, let's just hear what the melody's doing. So there's a sort of ARP in the background, but then there's a main lead, but it's very occasional at this stage. There's like one plucky note every so often, and there it's building. You can hear the ARP building. And that's the main melody, that ARP. And you can see in this next section, the new lead pluck. You get a new element. You get that new element, but it's got the ARP in the background, it's got the sparse pluck, and then it's got that new kind of lead pluck. And at that point in the track, there are no vocals, the bass is quiet, the drums are quite sparse. That is the main bit. If you listen to the full track at that point, that lead pluck is taking front and center stage. If we move on to the vocals, if you just hear them on their own, they're very breathy. Let's go to the machines. But then silence. The real beat just silent. And there's a hole in the key. I mean, he has this certain style which is quite sort of robotic, almost monotone. It's almost on the same note, and it just works almost as a rhythm with the rest of the track. I mean, he's singing about the space in between, and the track is all about the space between the different elements. A simple bass, a slightly more complicated sort of synth section which ebbs and flows, and then a sparse vocal. And if we go to the full track and listen to the chorus, you see how all those elements work together. If you went to the breakdown here, you have very sparse drums, almost no bass, you have no vocal, and the main building element wants to go to lead us back into the chorus is the synth line. That repeating, it's actually a single note, isn't it? The same note, I mean. And then the ARP's getting bigger, and then we hit the drop, vocal comes in. No drums though. It's like a kind of false drop. You're expecting this big drop, you're expecting the kick to come back in, and he doesn't do that. It's quite smart, I quite like that. When does the kick come in? If there's a hole in the key, at the bar in the basement. Okay, now we're back in. He still brings the kick in quite subtly, it's still a growing, so that chorus is almost like a build chorus before we go into the next one. So the lesson here is let your sounds breathe. Instead of filling every moment with sound, try using space as an active part of your arrangement. I mean, the clue's in the title, right? The space in between. He's telling us what he's trying to do in this track. At the bar in the basement. One of the most striking things about the space in between is its emotion. It's melancholic yet uplifting. It feels deep but not over dramatic. Look, I am not a singer by any stretch of the imagination. The way he sings makes me think I might be able to sing like this. I mean, it's kind of heavily processed. It's wide. It's almost robotic. It's quite kind of monotone, but it's restrained. And I think the lyrics are actually quite powerful,
silent,
which adds to it.
and there's a hole in the key.
You can really listen to them, and
At the bar in the basement.
they tell a story. So how does he achieve this? Well, most producers would assume that to create that kind of emotion, you need big melodies, dramatic chord changes, or loads of effects. But that's not what happens here in this track. Instead, the emotion comes from restraint. The melodies are simple and repetitive. The harmonies are subtle. The vocal delivery is soft and understated. Nothing is pushed too hard, and that's what makes it work. It allows the listener to feel the emotion rather than being told what to feel. If you look at the waveforms here on the screen, you can see that the drums are relatively constant in terms of volume, in terms of intensity. The bass line is relatively constant. It ducks a little bit when the melody gets louder. The main emotion that you're getting is through restraint and through simple melodies and letting each part of the track take its turn. And then the building and the volume and the intensity comes from the synth lines and maybe the lack of vocals. So the main chorus, as such, when he's singing the chorus, isn't really the loudest, most emotional part of the track. So this is what I've called the chorus. And the synth line is kind of in the background. The vocals and the synth are about the same level of intensity, I would say. They're kind of there combining. And then at the end of what I've called the chorus, the synth builds and the vocal drops out. And then you don't have the vocal. It's almost like if I was producing this, I would have probably made this section here the chorus. That's what I think, but there's no vocal. Like having no vocal in the chorus, it's not a normal thing to do in a pop track or even in a EDM track, and yet he does this, and I just really like the way he's done that. Let's just listen to that. Vocal drops out, synth builds. I mean, you know, in terms of arrangement and playing with your emotions, I love the feeling you get from that new melody, that pluck line coming in. I mean, look, this has got 19 million streams, this track. He obviously knows what he's doing. The lesson here is that emotion in music isn't just about what you add. It's sometimes about what you don't add. Maybe holding back is more powerful sometimes than going all out. Now let's talk about the structure. If you listen closely, the space in between is constantly evolving. It's not just looping the same thing over and over, it's always moving forward. One mistake beginner producers make is thinking of a track as a static loop. They create this 8-bar loop and copy-paste it across 3, 4, 5 minutes and just hope it works. But the best tracks, like this one, feel like you're on a journey. Blomqvist builds tension by gradually introducing new elements. The bass enters subtly. The vocals come in and they're sparse. At this stage, you don't even know there are vocals in this track.
Figure out how it got here.
Start coming in. Really is a slow build. And then if you look at the track, you can see from the start into this section here, this is almost like the full song, right? This is about 2.5 minutes, and you can see that the synth, the melody line is slowly built. We've got the chorus vocals, we've got the build. This is even in this section here, which I've called new lead plug, the volume and the intensity gets more and more and more. And then you're like, right, now what? What do I do now? Well, the tension release, you have got this build up of emotion. You need to then take the listener back on a journey, and you can see that the intensity then comes right down. Actually the bass gets much louder and the synth gets much quieter. Let's just take a listen to that at the end of the build here. Right down again, much more sparse, no vocals. Slightly louder bass. and the haunting vocals come back in. And just when we're getting used to it and we're thinking after these couple of vocal intros, we should be going into the chorus like we did before. No, he changes it up and we have a complete breakdown and almost everything comes out. Let's just take a listen to that. Right, I'm ready for the chorus now. I'm ready for it. No, it's going to make me wait. A hat to keep the rhythm going, but nothing else to know that we're in a dance track. A build, right, now's the chorus, right?
And it's all around us.
Well, we've got the chorus vocals, we don't have the chorus drums, and we don't have the chorus melody. I think that's really smart. And we then build up into the actual chorus. So it's got chorus vocals, but yeah, the melody isn't there. It's much more sparse. And we do another build into what is the chorus. And then these two sections here, you'll see, are basically the same as these two sections here. So this is when he is starting to repeat the track.
Space in between. And as much as I'd like to
Full on.
believe there's a truth.
The emotions building as well.
Illusion, well, I've come to conclude there's just nothing beyond it.
And it might be worth pointing out just at this stage, if you look at the green section, which are the drums here, this is a sort of chorus where there's almost like two parts to the chorus. It's almost repeated. And just to break it up, there is a little bit in the middle here where the kick comes out, just to create a bit of breathing space. It's almost like a high-passed kick, actually. This kick is still there. It might miss one or two kicks out, just a little bit of a break. And then before we go into the high energy bit, the kick comes out again. If you listen to this bit at the end. No kick for 2 bars, actually. So again, just while we're not just trying to repeat an 8-bar loop again and again, even if you have the same loop, and those drums on this section here are basically the same for about 32 bars here. But he has a little break halfway through the chorus. He has a longer 2-bar break at the end of both sections, just to give you a bit of a breather. Now, that's not rocket science. If you've done any music producing, you know that you want to create these sort of turnarounds and little breaks, but it's just nice to see it actually happening with a professional track and just how that works. And then the last 2 minutes, minute and a half is outro, basically. There are no vocals, the melody disappears, the bass is pretty constant, the drums are pretty constant. This is almost, I wouldn't like to say irrelevant to the track, but the track is basically done by this point. You know what you've got. You can then move on, and if you are DJing, you can mix it out to the next track. The lesson for us here is you should think of your track as a living thing. It should evolve over time, keeping the listener engaged without overwhelming them. Okay, so I am working on a new track and I have taken the space in between as my reference track. And if you look on the screen, I have the same chapter markers as I have throughout the rest of this video. That is the original. If I play the chorus, that's just what we've been going through, right? And I've taken that and I have created my own track, using that as a basis, as some ideas, as a springboard. Now, this is by no means finished or mixed particularly well, but just see how different my track sounds. And I started with this. And I created this. It's the same tempo. It has the same arrangement. But it couldn't be more different, right? Different groove, different style of vocal, different sound selection.
My head is spinning 'cause of you. I'm spinning out now.
So, using a reference track is unbelievably powerful. I do it for every single track, but don't be worried that it's going to just lead you to being a copycat producer. Absolutely not. It is a springboard for ideas, and off that springboard you can go in any one of hundreds of different directions and create something that is special to you. So, what can we learn from the space in between? Well, a few things, I think. I think it's a beautiful track. A simple groove like this can be more powerful, than a complex one if it's executed well. Secondly, space isn't empty, it's an instrument in itself. Thirdly, emotional impact doesn't come from excess, it comes from restraint. And I guess finally, a great track isn't just a loop. We kind of all know this. It's a journey, but this track really shows you how to do that well. And look, the great thing about this track is these techniques aren't just for deep house or minimal techno. You can apply them to any genre you're making, whether you're doing ambient or pop music or even hip hop. Now, if you want to go deeper into how to create hypnotic grooves in your own music, check out my video on how to program drums for maximum groove. Trust me, it'll change the way you think about rhythm. That's it for today. Let me know in the comments which track you want to see me break down next. I think this is a great exercise. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.